Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We are in the book of Psalms. We're looking at Psalm chapter 9. It starts off saying, I'm going to thank the Lord with all my heart. And the Lord deserves for our entire lives to be one of thanking him, of having gratitude to God. Do we only thank God when it occurs to us only on rare occasions? He goes on to say, I will praise, proclaim, tell of all your wonderful deeds. God is always working in our lives. Are we sharing that? Are we praising that? As he goes on, I will delight or rejoice or sing praise for what the Lord has done, as it said in verse 11. To praise the name of the Lord, who is the Redeemer of his people and who is the God over all the nations. And so do we only half-heartedly sing God's praises? Do we only half-heartedly proclaim his goodness? Some people only confess the Lord with their lips, but they don't act like they really give their heart to God. Do we love the Lord so much that we're eager to give him praise and worship him? Now he goes on in verse 3 to talk about how, the Lord turns back our enemies, and that we can rejoice because even the very names of the Lord's enemies have been blotted out forever. In eternity, these enemies we're not even going to remember them, because God is going to win such a victory over them. God is going to bring them to ruin. And so they stumble and perish before the Lord. And for us, God is upholding us and defending us, because he sits as an enthroned judge, and we are judged not by our goodness, but by his goodness and our trust in him, by our faith in him. But the enemies who reject him, he says, endless ruin will overtake them, and the Lord will uproot them. Even the memory of them will perish. But he goes on in verse 7. Before we get there, let me just back up and say, our enemy that seeks to harm both our flesh and spirit, that's Satan. Satan is our great spiritual enemy. He's a ruthless enemy, but the Lord has defeated him. And so we give praise to God because the Lord reigns. He's sovereign. He's the sovereign power over everything. He rules and he judges, and he has a seat of authority, as it says in verse 7 and 8. And so the Lord is a refuge, where we find peace as oppressed people. God will never leave or forsake you. He goes on that we sing the praises of the Lord, for he avenges the blood of his people. He doesn't ignore the cries of those who are afflicted. And so in verse 13, he cries out for mercy. And David's not doing that because he thinks he's better than everyone. In fact, we are always as sinners asking for God's mercy, so that again we can declare how God is faithful. And he talks about how the gates of the daughter of Zion, that's entrance into the people of God, or their church, we can sing praises and rejoice in the salvation that God has given us. But the gates of death, he talks about in the realm of death in verse 17, we think about all the ways that we sink into despair and sickness of sin, and we think we're going to be destroyed. But in the gates of Zion, amongst the people of God, God is working so that we can enter into his life, and that we can trust that he sits in judgment and will protect us. It says, the wicked are going to go down to the realm of the dead, but God won't forget his needy people. He will be the hope of the afflicted, and we will triumph. But that, he will strike terror in those powers that thought that they were endless, those powers that didn't think about God. He will wipe them aside, and we will be lifted up. Hey, thanks, friends. Have a blessed day.